Hello everybody, and welcome back to Occult Perspectives. So if you did not watch the last video, I recommend you go ahead and watch that video first. I just did a video earlier today before I went to work, had a short day, so now I'm back, and I'm going to go ahead and expand upon that. I did end the video pretty abruptly. The last video, I was going to add a guitar cover to the end of that video, but I wasn't really happy with how it came out. I need to work on my music again because I haven't been playing a whole lot of music. I've been so busy with life and the baby and all that. It's just always on the go. So it's nice when I get times like this set aside to study and meditate and, share information on this YouTube channel. If you're new to this YouTube channel, what I do primarily on here is I talk about different esoteric subjects and expand upon them so we can all work together, helping each other to grow in knowledge and understanding and ultimately power. Knowledge is power. And I teach you how to perform exercises such as the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, the middle pillar, so on and so forth. Now, I've kind of taken a step back from my own practices for a while because I've gotten so much new information that I didn't want to go too far down the path that I was going. I saw some different viewpoints on the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, which I recommend you go and check out Universal Mastery's video on that, why he doesn't perform the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. It's definitely one that I'm getting used to not performing because it's probably been at least 3 weeks since I've done one. And you would ask, why would you do this? Why go so far down the Western ceremonial magic tradition and then stop? Well, what the LBRP and those practices do is they get rid of all negative energy. In a sense, they get rid of all dark matter energy, which is what most of the universe is comprised of. And what it does is it tries to tear down resistance, but we need resistance. Resistance is what leads to evolution. And if we just keep clearing away our space and banishing everything, it starts to cause problems. I did it for years, and I got to the point where I was banishing so much and not invoking that it kind of created almost this void. I would be in complete control of my, physical surroundings. I would be very at peace, but I just got this sense that it was like walking around with heavy armor on all the time, to the point that it would just, people's energies are so discordant to begin with, discordant energies, that it would my shield would just block them away, and it would make me very hard and very tough. Actually was helping to harden my heart in some ways and be more judgmental and be more overly righteous. So that's what's really kind of brought me to, I think there's a reason, I've really been led to some of this Qliphothic information. Although I'm not going down that initiatory path, I'm still learning about this information, the dark side. Even in Star Wars, it's important to have a balance in the Force. The Sith philosophy is very much, very similar. If you want to look at the left and the right-hand path in magic, look at Star Wars. Start studying the lore of Star Wars, especially the Sith philosophy. And there's even a gray Jedi code, which is where they're neither light nor dark on that level of things as far as the Force goes. And remember, this energy, it's raw, it's the Force. The Force isn't good or bad inherently. It's how we use it. It's a tool. And remember that everything comes from primordial chaos, which is feminine in nature, and chaos cannot be controlled, it can only be directed. I think I mentioned this in the last video, but Universal Mastery has a video on feminine energy. I think it's called Feminine Energy in Universe B or something like that. Definitely go and check that video out. So anyway, without further ado, I've rambled on for long enough. In this video, we talked a little bit in the last video about the Tree of Life, the normal Sephirotic tree, and I did not bring my chart out here, which is fine because we're not going to talk a whole lot about that in this video. At some point, I would like to go through each of the Sephiroth and do a video on each Sephiroth, because I have a really good understanding of the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life at this point in time. I've read so many books. I've had so many life experiences where I kind of know, where I was going through phases where I was in certain areas on the Tree of Life. As far as the past, though, the 22 paths that are on the Tree of Life, that is something I need to educate myself about and have further knowledge on. But of course, in all of this, it's important to do research on the Qliphothic tree as well, the tree of death, because if you want to understand how all of this works, you really do have to study both sides. And trying to be this like overly righteous Christ consciousness individual, it hasn't really worked out for me, in the sense that it's kind of like those people who try to be priests, or they try to be some position within the church, and none of those people have embraced their shadow, really. They haven't gone into the depths of themselves. So they end up manifesting weird tendencies and stuff. We see a lot of kind of gross stuff going on within the church, and that's part of the reason why. Because you have these men that are claiming to be overly righteous who haven't even done their own spiritual development or work. And they haven't embraced the dark side, their true dark side. They're perverted because they've tried to be this light Christ consciousness being and walk that path, which is truly a difficult path to walk, because you will be tempted by the darkest of forces before you cross the abyss and you make your way all the way, to Kether, becoming a true being of light and all of those things, the rainbow body. So if you just negate the negative, and by negative I don't mean evil or bad, it's the negative polarity. If you ignore these things, the negative polarity being the more magnetic polarity, you're only going to hurt yourself in the end. And I think that's what's happened with me on my path with doing these exercises and stuff. I was only focusing on trying to purify and cleanse myself, and wasn't really working on the grounding, not really working on other aspects of myself. And now all of that stuff that I've kind of pushed away or to the side, it's really manifesting itself in my mind and in my life, in the sense that this other part of me wants to be known. This more primal, real part of me wants to work on itself, and in a way to where I don't just push those things away, I master them, I overcome them in their fullness. And in order to fully ascend the tree and really reach Kether and reach the Ayin and all of these things, and there's a deep occult secret which happens, when you tread the left-hand path. Thomas Carlson talks about it, where you reach godhood again. You've embraced your darkness, you've gone into the depths of the abyss and gained the sparks from the original creation of the world and the pieces of your soul. It's kind of like the opposite of the Horcrux thing in Harry Potter. Instead of trying to destroy all the different parts of your soul like they do to Voldemort, you're trying to gather all of the parts of your soul back together before you make the ascent. And then from there, once you've embraced all that, you can decide whether you want to be a dark brother or a brother of the light. And in essence, really both sides in a way are working, I believe, towards the illumination of mankind. I think Jesus and Lucifer are very much the same in a lot of ways. They are both the morning star. So there's this whole process where you attain godhood within the dark path, but then you go back to source, but then it reverts in on itself, and you, from this birthing, this highest point, or I should say degree of where the dark and the light meets, it's the highest point above the dualities. You transcend the dualities, and then from there you create your own universe. I'm going to go ahead and, I know I mentioned this book very briefly in the last video, Tree of Qliphoth. We're going to get into that in this video, but before I do that, I'm going to read the very last part of Thomas Carlson's Kabbalah, Qliphoth, and Goetic Magic, because it talks about what we were just talking about, reaching source, and then you create your own universe. Goetic magic, this is the epilogue of the book. Goetic magic has an obvious role in Qliphothic magic. The Kabbalah is based on ancient doctrines regarding the mathematical, geometrical foundation of the universe. It was developed within Jewish mysticism, but can be traced back to Platonic and Pythagorean ideas, which in turn might be traced even further back in time, going back to Egypt, Atlantis, and then even Lemuria, and all of these things. Certain ideas point to the possibility of Sumerian or Babylonian roots. Others claim that it was developed in Egypt, and some even that its roots could be found in the mythical Atlantis. The Kabbalah is a mystical, mathematical language for understanding spiritual processes, but it is a form of mathematics that is similar to music, and the different Kabbalistic spheres come to be associated with the tones of an octave. We know quite a bit about that. I talked a bit about that in the Pythagorean video I did on Pythagorean music, mathematics. Music and mathematics. Kabbalistic thoughts have arisen in many places of the world. Sanskrit has a role in the Indian mysticism that is reminiscent of Hebrew in the Kabbalah or the runes in Gothic Kabbalah. Although the Kabbalah warns the adept of the dark side, it also describes a dark path of initiation for those who are able to read between the lines. God uses the dark forces to create man and become a god if assisted by the force of the dark side. God uses the dark forces to create man. Interesting. The Kabbalah explains that in the beginning there was Ein, the eternal state that can only be explained by what is not. Ein denotes a negation. Ein is the limitless and timeless, without core or circumference, light and darkness in one, conscious and unconscious at the same time. Ein is all potentiality. Within Ein, a will to be self-aware was born, but nothing existed outside Ein, hence nothing that Ein could reflect itself in. One aspect of Ein wanted to create the world in which to view itself. This form of Ein is called the thoughtful light, or the Sheyesh Bo Mashava, and belongs to the right side. The other side of Ein wanted to remain in itself and oppose the plan to create the world. We talked about this duality inherent in the very beginning of the universe before. It's a very important concept. This form of Ein, The other side of Ein wanted to remain in itself and oppose the plan to create the world. This form of Ein is called the thoughtless light, or the She'ein Bo Masaba, and belongs to the left side. The right light separated itself from the left light and opened a void in itself in the beginning. This process is called Zimzum, and in this void, the right light created the universe through a number of emanations, which are called the right emanations. The right light manifests itself through the mathematical, geometrical structures of the Sephiroth that are the foundation of the created world. The right light is perceived as the only light by those created by the right light, and they call it God. As a shadow of the emanations of the right light, an anti-creation arises from the left light. These anti-worlds are created through the left emanations and are called the Qliphoth, and the other side, Sicha'ara, another name for hell, or the hell realms, because there are many different worlds, so to speak. They oppose the plan of the right light by bringing individuality and self-awareness to the inhabitants of the creation. When the parts of creation gain self-awareness, the right light is prevented from seeing only itself and its creation. The mirror is broken into several pieces. Thus, the Kabbalah explains that the nature of evil is separation, but at the same time, the prerequisite of creation is separation and demarcation. That's kind of a paradox in and of itself. The right light creates by separating itself from the left light and from its creation. This God is not a pantheistic God, but a separated monotheistic God. During creation, God separates the heaven and the earth, light and darkness, which is illustrated in the Genesis of the Bible, of course. When the parts of creation become self-aware, they can separate themselves from the Creator and begin individual acts of creation. This averts God's original plan. When the parts of creation reach self-awareness, they are separated from God and have the possibility to become gods. Those who are unconscious call the left light darkness and associate it with the serpent in the Garden of Eden or the great red dragon of the apocalypse. I'm assuming this could be the red dragon. I know it refers to Caput Draconi, the Draconis zodiac, but possibly also Amalek. Amalek's usually referred to as the black dragon, though, so I'm not sure if those are one and the same. There are two trees in the Garden of Eden. The tree of life belongs to the right light, and it consists of 10 Sephiroth, collectively known as consists of 10 Sephiroths, collectively known as the Sephiroth. It stands in the east. The tree of light is the tree of knowledge. The tree of the left light is the tree of knowledge that consists of the 10 Qliphothic, collectively known as the Qliphoth. It stands in the north, of course, because the north, regardless of which system you're doing your lesser banishing ritual, the pentagrams, which I recommend that you do east as fire instead of air as fire, west as earth, south as water, and north remains earth. A lot of these traditions are teaching to do them the other way, but as Universal Mastery says, this setup can really mess you up because it's already set up on the astral plane for fire to be east, water to be south, air to be west, and earth to be north. It stands in the north, this dark light. The Kabbalah describes how the left light, I should say, shines from the north. The light in the north is the light of Lucifer, and man takes part of it by eating the fruits of the tree of knowledge. Interesting, I know of a magazine called The Northern Light. The left light has been active through pride, sexuality, and the thirst for knowledge. These factors have created a desire in man to reach independence in relation to the universe. The tales about the fall of the angels and the fall in the Garden of Eden both describe this, as well as the character of the demons that the magician in a Faustian spirit conjures. As we know, Faust, he sold his soul to the devil for knowledge, basically. God has given man the quote, law to keep him within the frames of creation. The left light breaks the law and gives man an opportunity to independently decide what is good and what is evil. So the left-hand path is naturally, it's a more individualistic path anyway, which is how I came into spirituality to begin with. Before I was even in spirituality, knew about Masonry, knew about Kabbalah, knew about any of this stuff, I was a follower of objectivism, which is more of a service to, it's more of a service to self type of philosophy and kind of going against the grain. You know, I've always been that way. I've always been somebody who's gone against the grain of the mainstream because the mainstream just bothers me. It always kind of has, in its superficiality, you know. The left light teaches man of an existential maturity in relation to God, similar to the child in relation to its parents. It's kind of like, yeah, when the child grows up, it learns more about darkness. It learns more about its own nature, so it doesn't cleave to the parents as much. It's going off and it's creating its own reality, independent of the original Godhead or the parents in this case. Only when man has eaten of the fruits of knowledge, which she receives from the serpent, is she sexually awoken. The sexual force can now be used for reproduction, but also for self-deification. This is important with the concept of Lilith. The left light teaches man to become like God, and certain Kabbalists assert that the left light in this manner contributes to making God truly self-aware. Perchance it is so that God himself will tremble in the mirror before what will be revealed. Knowledge is a two-edged sword, and the blade has one edge of life and one of death. If, as the old Kabbalists, we decide to speak about God, or if we choose any other religion and call our God by other names, or if we prefer to talk about life and the universe, it does not matter in the least when standing before the dark mysteries. When standing before the dark mirror of death, our outer perceptions fade away, and we can either close our eyes in fear or stare into the darkness in Faustian curiosity. The darkness is a reflection of what is hidden inside us. By gazing into the abyss, our soul will reveal itself in its nakedness as something that will cause us both to scream and to laugh. When the laughs and screams have faded, we will discover that the most radical enlightenment and the strongest light can be found in the darkest depths. So it did go into the concepts of ayin a little bit that I was looking for there, but there's a better part in this book, and I'm going to have to make a note of it and figure out where that was. It's possibly even a section that I've read in a previous video before. But so that kind of gave you an idea of what I was referring to there before I read that section, but not completely. So let's go ahead and get into this just a little bit. In the last video, I was talking about kind of a darker version of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the middle pillar, which is actually in this book called the Dark Tower. So we'll go into that a little bit in this video, and then I'll wrap it up after that. Just to give you an outline of how this book works too. It takes you through each sphere on the Qliphothic tree and briefly explains them. That's not really the purpose of this book, is to go in deep into the philosophy of the Tree of Life or this tree, but they do still give really good, at the beginning of each chapter, they give you a really good description of each of these spheres. But what's more important is that they give you actual exercises and stuff to do in conjunction with that, but these are not exercises you are going to want to do lightly. As I've warned in my other videos, you don't go down the Qliphothic initiation unless that's something that you are going to go full-fledged into. There's no turning back. You know, it's one of the highest level paths that you can possibly take, but it's so very difficult, and everyone says it's difficult. Usually only about 1 out of 100 people will make that sojourn, that entire journey. But if you do, that's where the greatest reward and power lies. So I will probably quote some of this book in later videos because there's more good information on Lilith, which pretty much it's a lot of the information is what we read, you know, in the prior videos, or what I went over. It's a lot of the same material, gives you more viewpoints, goes a little bit deeper into what it's like, because there's a bunch of essays in this. People do the evocations and the invocations, and they basically, yeah, it's their experiences. Sometimes they're experiences, and sometimes they're just telling you what the exercises are and the visualizations to go through, what to expect, you know, when you're going through this stuff. So we will dig more into this, but for right now, let's go ahead and get into a little bit of the Dark Tower. And I'm probably just going to read straight through this because it's not too long. It is going to take me a minute, but I think all of this information is pretty important. So the Dark Tower is actually in the first chapter. So if you're working within the sphere of Lilith, and from how I understand it now, the first sphere, which is equivalent to Malkut on the Tree of Life, the sphere itself is called Lilith, but the demon queen ruling this sphere is Nama, which is the sister of Lilith. Well, sometimes sister. There's these deities and have different relationships to each other depending on which tradition you're coming from. So the Dark Tower, and this makes me think of the Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers. That was like the first thing that came to mind. And like Cirith Ungol, where Frodo and Samwise, they really it's Sam that goes in and kills all the orcs in that tower and saves Frodo. So here we go. The Dark Tower is a ritual of raising and focusing Qliphothic energy for magical empowerment. It is also a banishing method which is specifically designed for use within the draconian current of the left-hand path. And I want to go ahead and, you know, I recommend that you go and, if you're interested in the Qliphoth, go and buy this book. This is a newer book, so I recommend not just trying to find a free file online. Tree of Qliphoth, Temple of Ascending Flame, and the author, as I said in the last video, is actually a woman, Asenath Mason. So I thought that was super cool. I didn't realize that until I was about, you know, 30 pages or so into this book, even a little bit further than that, actually. So I'm going to continue reading. Most magicians at some point in their training become familiar, of course, with the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, LBRP, and the middle pillar exercise. Both of these rituals are well established within the Western esoteric tradition, and occasionally one comes across variations of them. And I've seen variations. You know, Crowley has his Star Ruby. I think Ruby Star or Star Ruby version of the LBRP, which actually works with the higher portion of the Tree of Life, I believe. There's videos on that on YouTube, of course. And I know that Damien actually, instead of evoking the 4 archangels in each direction, he evokes the 4 Sumerian gods, Enki, Enlil, and I can't remember the other 2 in each cardinal direction. So there's different variations of these rituals, of course. At its most fundamental level, the banishing ritual is an instrument of cleansing and consecration of the magician's personal sphere of action. It is a method of symbol and metaphor to strengthen the image of the magician's own divinity and magical power through invocation of the Kabbalistic cross and banishing of the 4 elements of creation. We were talking about that at the beginning of this video a bit. Indeed, one of its purposes is to manifest within the practitioner an image of the Tree of Life and the creating deity itself. Accordingly, the magical space created by the LBRP centers on the imagery of the Tree of Life, with the practitioner as the central trunk or pillar of that tree, rooted in and yet shielded from macrocosmic creation. The central pillar of the tree is manifested and the 4 elements are, quote, banished, with the pentagram of earth. It is as though the conquering element of spirit, as portrayed through the cross, becomes ascendant while the powers of earth, that is creation, are subdued. So that's one of the biggest differences in these 2 practices, is that, the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, you're subduing earth, you're doing away with the primal, the more earth elements, and you're bringing divinity down to earth. The Qliphothic is going to kind of do the opposite in a way. It's going to embrace the earth and the carnal and all of those things and the darker sides. The following ritual exercise is a variation of the LBRP adapted to the left-hand path, and more specifically a Qliphothic context. While the ritual employs the Kabbalistic cross and banishing pentagrams, it does so with the intent being sinister. It is not so much the cross of a conquering Lord being manifested, but rather the image of the individual triumphant and divine. It is the ritual iconography of the adept ascending the throne of Lucifer, of the adversary to creation, Satan ben Elohim becoming the Lord and enlightener of a new creation. The Dark Tower ritual represents an annihilation of the mundane universe and an opening up of the individual sovereign creation made possible through Qliphothic, gnosis, and magic. The middle pillar of the ritual rests firmly within the evocation of the Tree of Death, and the banishings are performed with inverted pentagrams of earth. These pentagrams do not merely represent an antinomian blasphemy of the ruling mundane methodology. They are ritual metaphors of not simply subduing the earth within the current universe, Universe A, and I'm glad she uses that, the same terminology that Universal Mastery uses as far as Universe A and Universe B. This is not simply subduing the earth within the current universe, Universe A, but of its complete deconstruction and remanifestation on the plane of a personal creation, Universe B. I currently employ this ritual as part of my regular magical exercises and find it to be wonderfully effective in regard to raising and focusing Qliphothic energy. It is also a powerful banishing ritual. You will note that the ritual employs a Lilith-based orientation for the god names when the pentagrams are cast. I consider this to be appropriate, not only because I maintain a special devotion to her, but also as the Queen of the Qliphoth. She is the principal gatekeeper and guide to descent into the Qliphothic world. So this little article, this whole book's compiled by Asenath Mason. Hopefully I'm not butchering that name. This section, this Dark Tower, is compiled by Kalia van de Rijn. And I'm going to read through this real quick. Yeah, I think I can just... I'm going to try to finish this up, and then we will end the video. The pentagram ritual of the Dark Tower. Before beginning the exercise, one may wish to briefly perform stretching and breathing exercises to help center one's awareness. For example, after a few simple stretches, one might take a few deep breaths and then proceed as follows. Before I do the Kabbalistic cross, I would usually do the relaxation ritual, which is just a raising up of the energy and relaxing your body and getting it ready for what you're about to do. Face west, imagine a resplendent dark light or fiercely burning black flame immediately above your crown. Using your left hand, touch the center of your forehead. You might put all 5 fingers while doing this, thereby representing the quintessence, or you may choose to put your thumb, index, and middle finger together, representing the union of the alchemical elements of sulfur, salt, and mercury, and the 3 veils of reality. Tohu, formlessness and desolation. Bohu, the void, and Chasek, darkness. If you wish, briefly meditate on the elements of veils, and then in a forceful hissing whisper, say Ahaye. Bring your hand down to the level of your groin, or profoundly bow towards your feet. As you move, imagine the dark light penetrating down to beneath your feet, where it expands in a hissing whisper, say Nehama. Bring your hand to your right shoulder while imagining the same light beginning to pulse brilliantly in a sphere at your shoulder. In a hissing whisper, say Golakab. Bring your hand to your right shoulder as you perform this motion. Imagine a pulsing sphere of the light form there as well. In a hissing whisper, say Gagashabla. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Put your palms together at the level of your forehead and say Le'olam Amen. As you bring them toward the level of your solar plexus, as you perform this motion, imagine the light form a cross which breaks into a many-rayed star of black light. Next, part your hands and stretch your arms out until you stand in the shape of a cross. 7. Take a deep breath and say the following while motioning your head and eyes slightly toward each respective direction. Toward the west. Hail Leviathan, and behold, for before me are the guardians of the gate of the west, powers of water. You may wish to imagine the horizon glowing with a deep blue light and feel the misty winds of a raging sea. Now, she says facing towards the west to do this water, so you may want to face the south if you're doing the other elemental configuration. Behind you to the east, hail Lucifer, and behold, for behind me are the guardians of the gate of the east, powers of air. Imagine a golden sunrise on a distant horizon. Feel a cool, gentle breeze. But I'm not really telling you what to do, because here it seems like east, you know. In the way that it's set up on the astral realm, apparently east would be in the west, actually. I'm sorry, air would be in the west instead of in the east. To the south, she says, or he says, I'm sorry, this was written by Kalia van du Rain, and I'm not sure if that's a man or a woman. To the south, hail Satan, and behold, for at my left hand are the guardians of the gate of the south. Imagine a fiery red horizon with a hot wind rising toward you. Toward the north, hail Belial, and behold, for at my right hand are the guardians of the gate of the west. Imagine a dark and mountainous horizon with an icy breeze flowing against your body. Next, bring your palms back together at the level of your forehead and say, for about me flames the pentagram, and within me shines the 6-rayed star, as you bring them toward the level of your solar plexus. That sounds very familiar. If you have a ritual dagger and wish to use it, take it in your left hand, point the blade, or simply point your fingers outward and trace the inverted pentagram of earth. Then punch the pentagram in the center with the dagger of your fingers while strongly exhaling. Next, take a deep breath and say, Hail Argot, Queen of Blasphemy, most exquisite and unholy, come forth. Then vibrate through a hissing whisper, Argot. If you prefer, you may wish to vibrate these names without the initial proclamations following the drawing of each pentagram. Holding the dagger or your fingers pointing outward, trace the first line of the circle terminating in the south. Next, using the same method as before, trace the inverted pentagram and say, Hail Mahalath, Mother of fornication and sabbatic fire, come forth. Then vibrate Mahalath. Trace the second line of the circle terminating in the east. Using the same method as before, trace the inverted pentagram and say, Hail Nama, Princess of Screeching, riding the wings of night, come forth. And these all have an exclamation mark at the end when you're saying them. Same with the Hail Leviathan, Hail Lucifer, etc., that we went over. So this would be step 12 at this point. Trace the third line of the circle terminating in the north. Using the same method as before, trace the inverted pentagram and say, Hail Lilith, black goddess from the darkened realms, come forth. Next, vibrate Lilith. Trace the fourth line of the circle terminating in the back and the west. At this point, you must decide if you wish to proceed with steps 14 through 18 or repeat the Qliphothic cross exercise in steps 1 through 5 before moving on to step 19. The use of the Qliphothic cross manifests a dark tower in which the tree of death becomes imposed upon the tree of life, representing its emergence into the realm of a personal new creation. If you prefer to use the Qliphothic tree, this emergence still occurs, but within a darker underworld context, one that further emphasizes the dark energies of the Qliphothic. Either method can be used depending upon your personal taste or any other magical work you may be integrating into the exercise. So this is step 14 at this point. So there's a little bit of skipping around if you decide to do steps 19, step 19 and 20. You can now start steps 14 through 18. That's where we're going to start now. This is optional. If you wish to proceed with steps 14 through 18 or repeat the Qliphothic cross exercises in step 1 through 5 before moving on to step 19. The next few steps comprise a second Qliphothic cross ritual, representing the formation of the Dark Tower as the center of your magical refashioning of the universe. You will note that this cross is essentially a traditional Kabbalistic or Sephirotic cross. Take a deep breath and then, using your left hand, touch the center of your forehead. In a hissing whisper, say, "Eh, hey, yay." Imagine the black light as before for each of the steps that follow. Bring your hand down to the level of the area between your navel and your groin. In a hissing whisper, say, "Malkuth." Bring your hand to your right shoulder. In a hissing whisper, say, "Gabura," or Ve Gabura. Same as the Kabbalistic cross. Bring your hand to your left shoulder. In a hissing whisper, say, "Vigdula." Put your palms together at the level of your forehead and say, "Leolam Amen," as you bring them toward the level of your solar plexus. So it's essentially the same as the Kabbalistic cross, it seems like, except you're in a hissing whisper rather than a vibration. Now push your hands together and then outward, forming the shape of a triangle by leaving the tips of the thumbs and forefingers touching, with the palms facing out. As you form the triangle, raise it to the level of your forehead. When ready, bring the triangle to your forehead and forcefully exhale as you send a strong blast of psychic force through the triangle and into the west while pushing the hands apart. Repeat this for each cardinal direction. Return to the west, which is funny because in most rituals you return to the east. The east is where you begin and where you end the practice. Return to the west. Gracefully place your palms together and profoundly bow. The pentagram ritual is thus concluded. And there's also a Qliphothic middle pillar exercise here. I'm not going to go ahead and read that right now. If you want me to read that for the next video or one of my other videos, I can go ahead and do that. So that gives you kind of a little taste of this book, and we'll go into information on the different spheres on the Qliphothic tree, because there's some really nice sections in this explaining, giving a brief but yet thorough explanation of them. So, alrighty everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. So thank you all for watching. If you're subscribed, thank you for being subscribed to this channel. Thank you for being a part of this family. I consider you all family. You know, I love you all. Sorry for ending the last video pretty abruptly. I just didn't like the way my guitar cover turned out. So that means I'm gonna have to practice some music. I'm getting rusty. So once again, thank you everyone. Please subscribe, please like, and ring the notification bell if you want to be notified of new videos. And also we just passed 600 subscribers. So that's another, that's a really cool, I guess, achievement. We'll put it that way. So thank you once again, everyone. Peace and blessings. And until next time.